Decades ago, the world shifted and started mutating into something straight out of a nightmare, as vicious ghosts and monsters flooded in, turning the planet into a brutal playground for the strong. But humanity hit back by awakening special professions and master skills to survive the chaos. So now awakened warriors carve out a future by hunting down these beastly threats, proving that only those with the highest rank and raw power can truly stand at the top. Which brings us to the Longxia Federation, where the students at Reicheng High School are readying for the big day, because today is the official awakening ceremony that decides their entire future career path, and the combat instructor Liu Hu is barking orders to get everyone fired up for the challenge, while hoping that every single student manages to manifest a top-tier combat profession. But for Fang Zhou, this day has been a long time coming since he transmigrated into this dangerous world. And he steps forward with total confidence as all eyes in the school land on him, so the instructors call out for Fang Zhou to take his place at the altar immediately, and he moves toward the center, ready to see what kind of power he's going to wield, while the other students gossip about his looks and bet that he will definitely awaken as a priest, even though some of the jealous guys in the crowd are quick to dismiss his potential just because of his face, yet Liu Hu watches from afar. Holding a file that identifies Fang Zhou as the orphan of a martyr, and the instructor realizes why Fang Zhou has been flying under the radar until this exact moment, as Fang Zhou touches the glowing ritual circle to begin the process, and his intense gaze locks onto the energy, signaling that something massive is about to happen. Then a blinding surge of power erupts from the altar, leaving the entire crowd breathless at the sheer intensity. The energy erupting from the altar twists into dark, jagged spikes of raw power, and the very atmosphere tears open as if reality itself is crumbling under the pressure, while Liu Hu watches in absolute disbelief, questioning what kind of insane ability could possibly trigger such a phenomenon, as a legion of skeletal horrors manifests from the void, filling the space with their terrifying presence, and Fang Zhou stands at the center of this grim army. Looking utterly unfazed by the death surrounding him, while he raises his hand to command the shadows, signaling that his awakening has reached its final form, the system confirms that Fang Zhou has successfully awakened as a necromancer, and he stares at the notification with a calm intensity, processing the implications of his new role. But the laughter of the surrounding students breaks the tension, as they realize he drew one of the most controversial classes, mocking him for putting on such a flashy show only to end up with a profession known for its crippling limitations. Because everyone knows that despite their rare power, necromancers usually fail due to their inability to truly connect with the undead realm, so the onlookers continue to jeer, thinking he is doomed to be a weakling since living humans cannot master such dark arts. Yet Fang Zhou remains completely confident, ignoring their insults while his system interface displays his new stats and rank. Then his hand flares with a sinister green glow as he accepts the gift from the Undead Realm experience system, and Fang Zhou realizes his golden cheat has finally arrived, turning his perceived weakness into his greatest strength, because the system allows him to automatically connect to the Undead Realm and create a clone, which he can use to devour other creatures and level up without any of the usual risks. So a cold, knowing smile creeps across his face as he prepares to test his newfound authority. Then Fang Zhou commands the system to summon his first loyal servant, a powerful skeleton warrior, and the creature emerges, ready to devour and grow stronger, proving that his potential is limitless, with his sights set on turning the entire undead realm into a personal hunting ground. Fang Zhou decides to save his experience points and orders the system to summon his skeleton clone. The air crackles with intense magical energy as the summoning circle begins to expand. Pulses of light ripple outward, tearing through the fabric of space to open a rift, and the skeleton clone materializes in the physical world, towering and ready for action. Fang Zhou notes that he can manifest his strongest summon directly, effectively bypassing the usual limits of his class. While the instructor calls the next student forward, ignoring the massive armored skeleton looming behind our hero, some of the girls in the crowd start whispering about how cool the summon looks, but the jealous assassin in the front row rages at the unfairness of Fang Zhou pulling such a showy move, plotting to destroy the skeleton and ruin Fang Zhou's leveling progress. The assassin channels his energy into a hidden projectile, launching a silent sleeve arrow directly at the summon. The skeleton reacts instantly to the incoming threat, its eyes burning with a menacing blue fire, and it effortlessly dodges the projectile with a speed that defies all conventional logic, leaving the assassin completely baffled as his lethal attack misses its target entirely, before the skeleton counterattacks in a blur of motion, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Slamming its fist into the assassin's face with enough force to send him crashing into the dirt, the creature follows up with a brutal strike from its weapon, pinning the stunned assassin to the ground, who looks up in absolute terror, realizing his pathetic attempt at sabotage has backfired spectacularly, and the assassin scrambles backward on the grass, desperate to escape the relentless, cold-eyed warrior, while the instructor finally intervenes to demand an explanation for the sudden violent escalation. The rival seethes, realizing the summon is way too fast to catch off guard, so he decides to go all in with a desperate final strike, charging forward with his mana-infused blade drawn and ready to kill. He lunges at Fang Zhou with everything he has, screaming in pure frustration, but Fang Zhou does not even flinch, catching the rival's wrist with casual precision. The impact of the sudden stop sends the rival reeling in complete shock. As Fang Zhou mocks him for being so arrogant and weak, he tightens his grip, channeling his energy to crush the rival's spirit, and with one brutal motion he flings the guy across the entire training field. The rival slams into the ground, sliding through the dirt like a ragdoll, coughing up blood while his pride is absolutely shattered in front of everyone. The summon stands guard, bored by the pathetic display. As Fang Zhou turns to walk away, onlookers whisper about how Lu Hu just got one shot. Completely rethinking the rumors about necromancers, a few teammates rush to help the defeated Lu Hu, who is struggling to even stand. Lu Hu screams out a hollow threat, but he is clearly in no shape to fight. Leaving the scene behind, Fang Zhou heads toward a quiet, empty part of the campus far from the noise of the crowd. He calls out to his internal system, asking to initiate the special Undead Realm experience to unlock new potential. The system interface flickers to life, confirming he can devour other creatures for a massive power boost. So he accepts the risk, preparing to enter the deadly realm to hunt for stronger souls. 18 years of waiting have led to this moment, and Fang Zhou refuses to waste a single second of it. A system prompt flashes, warning him that the Undead Realm carries unknown risks. But he does not hesitate for a heartbeat, tapping confirm to dive straight into the void. Energy swirls around him as reality shifts, dragging Fang Zhou into a dark, decaying dimension. He arrives in a desolate wasteland under a blood-red moon, where the ground is littered with ancient bones. Surveying the grim horizon, he notices the skeleton clone is already present, waiting in the shadows. Checking the status window, Fang Zhou realizes his summon has inherited a unique skill called skeletal armament, which allows the skeleton to forge its own gear from the remains scattered across this cursed land. Understanding the potential of this innate ability, he decides it is time to put the clone to work. Turning his focus toward immediate survival, Fang Zhou commands the summon to scavenge for better equipment. Movement ripples through the darkness as a predatory beast tracks their scent from the brush. Snarling with hunger, a massive shadow wolf lunges out to claim its next meal. The skeleton clone barely manages to block the fangs with its spear-sharp claws tear at its ribcage, forcing the summon to backpedal against the sudden onslaught. Realizing the danger of this realm, Fang Zhou watches as the beast presses its advantage. One misplaced step leaves the skeleton stumbling over the uneven terrain. The wolf snaps its jaws shut on the clone's limb, pinning it to the ground. Seeing his summon trapped, Fang Zhou steps in to turn the tide. He unleashes a crushing counterattack, slamming into the wolf while the clone regains its balance. Together they unleash a flurry of strikes, tearing the beast apart before it can recover. That kick did not even faze the beast, and the summon realizes it needs to adapt. Dodging incoming strikes requires incredible focus, but the clone knows this attrition fight is a losing game, spotting a massive pile of bones nearby. A new plan forms in the summon's empty skull. More wolves charge in from the shadows, and the summon prepares to tap into its true potential. Channeling its innate skill, the summon begins pulling raw material from the surrounding bone piles. A sharpened scythe forms in its hand, and the summon lunges forward to meet the pack. The wolves are relentless, closing the distance despite the new weapon. Fangs sink into the summon's shoulder, and the mechanical feedback echoes through their shared bond. Fang Zhou coughs up blood as the pain of the summon's injury manifests in his own body. Realizing that damage sustained here transfers to reality, Fang Zhou grits his teeth through the agony. The summon does not care about the pain, knowing it only needs to finish the fight. Blue flames burn brighter in its eyes as it focuses its intent on the kill, diving into the heart of the pack. The summon commands the very essence of death to serve its will. Bone shards whip through the air, piercing the wolves with lethal precision. The pack leader goes down in a spray of darkness, its throat slashed by the scythe. Spinning through the remaining shadows, the summon harvests the fallen wolves with ruthless efficiency. No beast is left standing as the summon clears the immediate area. Silence returns to the realm, and the clone stands over the pile of corpses. Checking the status of its gear, the summon confirms that the system's power is even greater than expected. A strange glow emanates from the remains of the leader, and the summon pauses to investigate the prize. The summon reaches for the fallen leader's remains, and a sudden gnawing hunger erupts from within. Reeling from the unexpected craving, the clone questions this strange new sensation. Primal instincts scream to devour, power up, and evolve as blue energy surges through its frame, absorbing the essence. The skeleton feels its very core shifting and feeding on the lingering soul fire. The system chimes with a notification, confirming an immediate attribute upgrade for the summon. Strength and agility stats climb while new soul power points materialize for potential growth. This unique resource acts as a catalyst for deducing new skills and forging better gear. Realizing the strategic potential, the summon understands that its path to dominance is clear. It must continue to explore, slaughter, and feed to climb higher on the food chain. Fang Zhou feels the connection sharpen as he watches the clone commit to endless hunting. Infinite growth is now the goal, and the desolate landscape serves as its training ground. Moving through the ruins, the skeleton spots another target lurking in the shadows. Despite its current status as a frail apprentice-level summon, the potential for improvement is massive. Manifesting its will, the summon activates skeletal armament to craft a deadly bone spear. Striking with newfound precision, the clone cuts through the enemy to earn more stat gains. Constitution rises along with its soul power as it weaves through the combat. Claiming the battlefield, the skeleton revels in the raw power coursing through its bones, yet the current strength is not enough, so the summon prepares for even greater heights. Back in reality, the morning sun hits the school grounds while Fang Zhou considers his next move. He stands with his classmate, already plotting how to leverage his summon's rapid evolution to get stronger. Fang Zhou is caught off guard when his classmate calls out to him. Bai Xiaochen approaches him, clearly concerned by the fresh blood staining his hand. She assumes he is self-harming due to the stress of his new profession, realizing he has been totally misunderstood. Fang Zhou vows to pick a quieter spot for his future visits to the undead realm. He tries to brush off her worries by calling it a minor, careless scratch. The girl remains skeptical but lets the topic slide for the moment. Rushing to make it back before meditation class starts, the two head toward the building. Fang Zhou is struck by a sudden coughing fit, causing Bai Xiaochen to offer him an escort to the infirmary. Rejecting the offer, he secretly receives a system warning about the physical toll the undead realm takes on his body. Noticing a strange energy manifestation, he realizes something is shifting within his own stats, as Bai Xiaochen checks on him again. His attributes show a clear increase in strength and spirit. The system confirms his skills are evolving, specifically noting his skeleton summoning ability is gaining new potential. He wonders if he might actually be a top-tier awakened one capable of crafting unique custom skills. Arriving at the school teaching building, they prepare to face the day ahead. Inside the classroom, Fang Zhou takes his seat among the other students. A teacher named Shen Hongyu enters the room. Introducing herself as a silver-ranked fire mage, she explains that the upcoming lesson will focus on basic meditation methods to anchor their professional skills. The class learns that steady meditation is essential for increasing their spirit power over time. Acknowledging that success takes practice, the teacher admits even she struggled to master the basics at the start. Fang Zhou ignores the lecture as his system prompts him to begin learning a new skill through the entry-level meditation stage. Fang Zhou taps the system prompt to begin the new skill training. Green energy surges around him as the process kicks into high gear. His own reflection shifts into a skeletal visage while the data flows. The system confirms he has mastered the skeleton meditation method in record time. Reading the fine print, Fang Zhou realizes the technique relies on visualizing a skeleton, which is basically second nature since he can just look at his own summoned clone. He notes that as long as he stays out of the undead realm, his clone will maintain constant training. But the system warns that his spirit power is already being consumed by the realm's passive effects. Deciding to lean into the grind, Fang Zhou initiates another session of Undead Realm experience. His skeletal double stalks through the dark, hostile landscape once again. Combat breaks out immediately, netting him small but steady gains in constitution and soul power, hungry for more progress. The summon tears through the local threats. A system alert chimes to signal his skill proficiency has reached the instinct level. It prompts him to use these gains to deduce a brand new ability. His skeletal clone adopts a meditative pose to begin the complex analytical process. Green code matrix pulses intensely as the system works to generate an evolution. Success flashes on his screen with the arrival of a new combat art. The system identifies it as Bone Javelin. A projectile capable of piercing armor. Fang Zhou discovers this unlocks a massive skill tree including shields and prison traps. Noting he will need significantly more soul power to expand his arsenal, he turns his gaze toward the next target. Fang Zhou spots a group of enemies and decides to test his new ability, unleashing the bone javelin with enough force to shatter the ground upon impact. The projectile obliterates the target, leaving behind only scattered remains. He notes the power is significantly higher than his basic undead skills, but the system reports his primary attributes and soul power are dropping, forcing him to realize that low-level monsters no longer offer efficient gains, which means he must venture into deeper, more dangerous zones to acquire bone essence. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, a classmate tries to sneak a look at Fang Zhou. The classmate reaches out to grab his shoulder, interrupting his focus, prompting Shen Hongyu to notice the commotion between the two students. A loud student shouts out that Fang Zhou is clearly struggling with meditation, arguing that since no one else has awakened such a profession, his efforts are likely wasted. Shen Hongyu warns the class to stay focused. Though she clearly doubts Fang Zhou's progress, the loud student brandishes a flame art to show off his own superior cultivation speed, telling Fang Zhou that he should acknowledge the massive gap between their professions, but Fang Zhou coolly dismisses the display as being nothing more than average. The loud student snaps and challenges Fang Zhou to prove his meditation skills, before Fang Zhou releases a sudden burst of dark pressure that catches everyone off guard. Shen Hongyu quickly intervenes to restore order in the classroom, while Fang Zhou calmly tells the student to back off so he can continue his work. Fang Zhou decides to stop playing around and show his true progress, leaving the class and Shen Hongyu completely baffled that he actually managed to meditate. As he channels the skeleton meditation method and shadows begin to swirl around his body, releasing a massive wave of energy that ripples through the classroom and shocks the loud student. Shen Hongyu can hardly believe he reached the entry stage of such a difficult technique. While Fang Zhou notes that his speed is already 100 million times faster than an average genius, their teacher walks over to acknowledge that his cultivation progress is actually impressive, and he throws down the gauntlet by demanding a test tomorrow to see if it's real. The rest of the class reacts with confusion at such a sudden, high-stakes announcement, but the loud student sneers, convinced that Fang Zhou is just a fraud who will get exposed. Meanwhile, Fang Zhou shifts his focus to the undead realm to keep training, where he pushes his physical limits against the endless waves of monsters. Realizing that his stay in this hellish dimension has increased significantly since his breakthrough, he commits to a grind until his spirit power is completely drained, and he commands his skeletal avatar to keep hunting without a single moment of rest, slashing through the horde with relentless intensity to maximize his gains. The undead swarm around him as he hungrily hunts for even more experience, until the field of battle is littered with the remains of his enemies, and he finally feels his spirit power nearing its absolute limit for the day. So the system confirms his stats have leveled up, proving all that effort was worth the strain. The system prompt flashes before his eyes, confirming the final decision, as green energy surges through his skeletal avatar during the upgrade process. Power pulses deep within his hollow chest, and the transformation reaches its peak intensity. Finally, the system announces a successful upgrade and grants him a new combat skill, which gives him the ability to unleash a massive physical blow at entry level. So he notes the potential for faster grinding in this desolate realm, but the sudden drain of his spirit power hits him like a physical blow, leaving him kneeling on the ground, realizing he pushed his limits way too far. And he wakes up back in the real world on the school sports field, clutching his head in pain because his spirit power is still dangerously low. But Bai Xiaochen approaches him, questioning why he looks so worn out after a week of training. Meanwhile, students nearby gossip about the difficulty of reaching the entry stage of the meditation method, and the loud student interrupts the conversation to mock Fang Zhou, so Bai Xiaochen steps in to defend him, threatening to shut the loud student up for good. But the loud student just laughs, bragging that he has learned a professional skill and intends to crush Fang Zhou, until Shen Hongyu steps onto the field to break up the rising confrontation, telling them to save their energy for fighting monsters instead of each other, and he acknowledges the progress Fang Zhou has made in the meditation class. So Fang Zhou watches Shen Hongyu walk away, feeling grateful for the teacher's intervention. Shen Hongyu calls everyone together for an immediate assembly on the field, and he orders his assistants to bring out the equipment for the next phase. So the students watch curiously as a heavy crate is rolled into the center, which contains an apprentice-level golem designed to measure their attack and defense stats. And Shen Hongyu explains that these units have a baseline defense power of 100, but a nervous student worries aloud if the machines are even durable enough to survive. So Shen Hongyu slams his hand on the golem to prove its sturdiness, while a student named Lu Renjia offers 20 contribution points to anyone who can dismantle one, and Fang Zhou immediately realizes those points are vital currency for buying gear and skills. So the students scramble to line up and test their strength against the machines, and Fang Zhou steps forward to take his turn, igniting flames around his fingers. Then he launches a fireball that slams directly into the metallic target, but Shen Hongyu notes that Fang Zhou only hit 48, showing he needs more practice, and another student tries a physical attack with a skill, landing a score of 41, while a third student fires a petrifying arrow that barely reaches a score of 50, because the common profession students finish their turns with unimpressive results across the board. So the classmates lament that not a single person managed to break the 60 threshold, and Fang Zhou wonders if his skeleton clone's power would count if he used it. But the loud student approaches him, mocking his low score and lack of talent as he draws his own weapon, eager to show off the professional skill he learned. The loud student slams his phantom dagger into the golem, racking up a massive score of 80. And he gloats to the crowd about his hidden profession prowess, but others quickly point out that his actual attack power is quite low, so Lu Renjia calls forward the next student, Yifan, to take his turn, while the onlookers whisper about Yifan's rare demon hunter awakening and the special research group the school formed just for him, as Yifan summons a crescent-shaped blade and begins to channel his energy, and he launches a vengeance strike, slashing through the air with lethal precision. But the golem's counter only climbs to 65, leaving the crowd disappointed by such a modest result. Then Yifan's eyes flare with a green glow as he refuses to quit, and he accelerates his assault, driving the cumulative combo score to 69 while the machine's display spikes rapidly, hitting 88 before the blows even stop. So Yifan finishes his flurry with one final strike, pushing the total to a perfect 100, and the instructor confirms the maxed out score, leaving the loud student staring in disbelief, while Fang Zhou watches the display, realizing that cumulative damage is the secret to destroying these golems. As the other classmates watch Yifan walk away, acknowledging that no one else can match that level of power, and Yifan smugly reflects on his own superiority, certain that he stands at the top of the class, but the loud student tries to save face, claiming he could have done the same if he had just attacked a few more times. So Lu Renjia signals for Bai Xiaochen to step up and prove her worth, and she takes a deep breath, determined not to lose face as a representative of the hidden classes, while she moves with intense agility, unleashing a flurry of strikes against the metallic target. But the machine only registers 31, and she realizes her combat power is significantly lower than she expected. The classmate mocks Bai Xiaochen for her lackluster performance, shifting the spotlight to Gujik, and he unleashes a flurry of chain wind energy missiles, landing a respectable score of 72, while Zhao Yuan follows up with a heavy shield armor impact, clocking in at 69, and Chen Yang slams the golem with his giant hammer, pushing his own capability to 84, but the instructor notes that none of these results are breaking the century mark. Then Fang Zhou steps forward, finally ready to put his Necromancer class to the test. While the arrogant loud student laughs at the idea that a summoner could score above 10, and he openly mocks Fang Zhou, betting that the Necromancer will not even scrape together 20 contribution points. So the loud student makes a ridiculous wager, promising to eat the testing puppet if Fang Zhou succeeds, but Fang Zhou simply acknowledges the challenge with a calm, dangerous grin, and he walks onto the testing floor, ordering the crowd to clear some space for his summons, while he begins channeling a massive amount of energy that forces the ground to crack beneath him, and the skeletons emerge in a swarm, their glowing eyes fixed on the target as the air grows heavy, while the onlookers panic at the sheer number of undead, realizing this is far beyond a standard apprentice-tier summon, and even the seasoned observers are rattled, knowing that history's greatest necromancers could not match this output. While Fang Zhou commands his forces, proving his talent is leagues above the competition, and he remains focused on the task, fully aware that this display will change how everyone sees him. So the skeletons launch their assault, moving with a speed that defies their undead nature, while the crowd watches the blur of motion, stunned by the sheer velocity of the attack. And the puppet takes a brutal hit, the machine sensors struggling to track the overwhelming force of the skeletons. The power levels climb past 45 and 60, hitting 65 as the puppet takes hit after hit, but the spectators are unimpressed, whispering that 65 is a mediocre score for a swarm of skeletons, and the classmate mocks Fang Zhou for the low damage, laughing that each skeleton barely contributes 10 points, so Fang Zhou smiles, telling the arrogant guy that the real show is only just getting started, as he signals his army to ramp up the intensity, declaring that 20 units will change the math, while Bai Xiaochen watches in awe, confirming to the others that Fang Zhou has clearly been holding back, and the testing machine registers a sudden, massive surge in pressure as the skeletons shift their formation, while the display screen flickers wildly, jumping straight to 97 and then hitting a perfect 100. And the final impact creates a massive shockwave that rocks the facility, pinning the score at a staggering value, while the dust begins to settle over the testing ground, leaving the crowd in total heavy silence, as the onlookers realize the puppet's sensors have completely failed, calling Fang Zhou a monster rather than a human, and the classmate stares in disbelief at the readout, watching as the numbers climb all the way to 999, while terror sets in for the guy who made the wager. Realizing he is about to lose everything, and the puppet lies broken on the ground, literally unable to handle the sheer force of the Necromancer's assault, so Fang Zhou walks over, holding the puppet's head, and tells the classmate it is time to fulfill his promise, but the guy starts stammering, desperately trying to back out of the bet he made earlier. And Fang Zhou lets his aura flare, ordering the loudmouth to vanish from his sight before he loses his temper, while the classmate turns and flees the arena, completely humiliated by his own arrogance, and Bai Xiaochen rushes over to congratulate Fang Zhou, playfully begging him to share his secrets for getting so strong. So Fang Zhou brushes off the instructor's praise, acting as if this overwhelming display of power was nothing special. A senior mentor corners the principal, insisting that Fang Zhou absolutely must secure a spot in the elite cultivation program. Meanwhile, the principal reviews the latest academy status report, noting that over 8% of the student body failed to awaken their powers, and he runs down the list of 85 rare class holders who are already slated for the top-tier cultivation resources, confirming that these rare individuals will definitely receive the priority training slots provided by the school. But his gaze lingers on a specific file tucked away in the back of the pile, dismissing the Necromancer as someone with zero future potential who should stay excluded from the elite track. While the academy continues its search for new talent, oblivious to the debate happening behind closed doors, a sudden knock interrupts the silence in the office as the door swings wide, and Lu Renjia marches in, ignoring the principal's busy schedule to drop a massive bombshell regarding his student. He slams the file onto the desk, demanding that the principal look closely at the potential hidden within Fang Zhou, insisting with absolute conviction that the Necromancer deserves a place on the school's highly coveted cultivation seed list. The principal counters that necromancy is notoriously difficult to master, citing the lackluster combat performance of previous class members. And he questions what kind of leverage or background Fang Zhou could possibly possess to warrant such a radical exception. Lu Renjia reveals that the students' parents were high-ranking Federation heroes, a detail that clearly catches the principal off guard. The principal acknowledges the family legacy, but warns that the seed list demands responsibility far beyond mere resource allocation. Yet Lu Renjia pushes further, highlighting the massive discrepancy between the student's class and his actual combat output, explaining that Fang Zhou mastered the skeleton meditation technique on his very first attempt and currently commands 20 summons in active combat. This revelation hits the principal like a train, prompting him to authorize a look into the student's performance when the simulated battlefield opens. As the principal stares at the profile, he finally shows a shred of genuine curiosity about what the boy might actually accomplish. While out on the training grounds, the mystery surrounding Fang Zhou's sudden rise to power continues to loom over the academy. Bai Xiaochen brings up the rumors about Fang Zhou's summons, but he just brushes it off as nothing special. She warns him that people are calling him an arrogant rich kid who just buys his power. Fang Zhou keeps his true potential hidden behind a smirk, knowing his current display is barely a fraction of his strength. Their conversation gets interrupted when a stranger calls out to stop Fang Zhou in his tracks. Yifan introduces himself with an intense amount of confidence, declaring he feels stronger than ever and needs a worthy rival. The sudden declaration leaves both Bai Xiaochen and Fang Zhou completely baffled by his weird energy. Fang Zhou tries to walk away, calling Yifan a total chunabu and refusing to deal with his nonsense. Yifan persists, clarifying that he is not looking for a fight but specifically needs a professional sparring partner, explaining his background as a demon hunter from a specialized research group. He insists he needs a partner for combat data. Fang Zhou remains skeptical, openly questioning why he should bother helping out with someone else's research project. Yifan drops an offer of 10 contribution points, which is enough to cover all of Fang Zhou's expenses for 2 full weeks. The deal is sealed instantly with a handshake, leaving Bai Xiaochen stunned that he would agree to work with such a strange guy. Without wasting a second, Yifan leads them toward his facility. Eager to begin the collaboration, Bai Xiaochen questions his decision to follow such a weirdo, but Fang Zhou reminds her that 10 contribution points is a massive payout. He knows exactly where that money is coming from, and he is more than happy to take the generous advance. Bai Xiaochen realizes Yifan is likely a wealthy second-generation student, given how easily he throws those points around. She wonders why the Research Association would be so generous, only to realize the points are actually just a loan he will have to repay. Fang Zhou understands the catch, knowing Yifan is essentially signing himself up for years of debt to the association just for this study. They arrive at the research building, where Yifan tells them to hurry inside to get things started. Walking into the lab, they see the high-tech setup where Yifan plans to conduct his intense combat testing. Fang Zhou takes in the high-tech lab equipment while Chen Qingshan waits for them to settle in. The man in the lab coat introduces himself as the official in charge of the association's logistics. Chen Qingshan acknowledges the group, though he barely glances at the companion as he focuses on the newcomers. Fang Zhou senses a heavy combat aura radiating from the researcher. Recognizing him as a high-tier professional, they learn that a senior hunter recently cleared a high-level dungeon. Prompting the association to study that specific power, Chen Qingshan explains that Yifan's new demon hunting class is the primary focus of this scientific research project. Turning his attention to Fang Zhou, the researcher mentions that he has already pulled up all of his records. He offers to handle the research logistics for Fang Zhou personally, but the offer is immediately declined. Fang Zhou has no intention of drowning in decades of student debt just to satisfy some association experiment. Seeing the rejection, Chen Qingshan pivots to their real goal by guiding them toward the combat testing arena. He promises that safety measures are strictly enforced so they can go all out without fearing for their lives. The researcher allows them to pick 3 pieces of gear from the armory to boost their stats for the trial. Fang Zhou eyes the equipment, knowing he needs to optimize his skeletons to counter Yifan's high-speed burst damage. He activates his skill deduction menu to find the most efficient path for his current combat needs. The system interface lights up as he pours points into upgrading his skeletal summons and defensive bone shielding. Shedding his heavy coat to get ready for the spar, he realizes he needs to be at his absolute peak. Yifan pulls out a bladed bow. Bragging that his mastery skill makes him a nightmare even for summoners, Fang Zhou just smiles at the bravado. Keeping his true power hidden as he prepares to test the field, green mana flares around him as he fully activates his soul split and summoner traits to push his stats higher. The arena grows heavy with energy as he finishes his final preparations, ready to show if the researcher's theory holds any weight. Yifan flaunts his weapon, mocking Fang Zhou's composure as the spar begins, but he warns that the research group's latest enhancements have pushed him to a new level. Suddenly, he lunges forward with a burst of speed that leaves a trail of green mana. The observers in the control room debate the outcome, noting Yifan's terrifying combat instincts. Lu Renjia interjects to challenge their hasty predictions as he steps into the room. Chen Qingshan greets him. Both men turning their focus to the unfolding duel, the teacher points out Fang Zhou's physical fragility. Casting doubt on his ability to survive, news of Yifan's newly mastered displacement skill catches everyone by surprise. Yifan closes the gap instantly, forcing Fang Zhou to retreat and dodge the incoming strike. Keeping distance becomes Fang Zhou's only priority as he realizes the sheer speed of his opponent. His rival refuses to let him breathe, taunting him while preparing another lethal attack. A barrage of energy projectiles tears through the air, forcing Fang Zhou into a desperate evasion. Mana begins to swirl around the summoner as he weaves his own defensive magic into the fray. Massive circles of light ignite on the floor, calling forth a legion of skeletal warriors. These summoned units immediately form a wall, intercepting the incoming volley of projectiles. Yifan recognizes the threat and pivots to interrupt the summoning rhythm before the horde grows. The summoner barely manages to finish the ritual under the heavy pressure of the assault, dodging a narrow miss. He stabilizes his footing while the battlefield fills with his undead allies. More skeletons manifest from the void, their glowing eyes fixed on the charging attacker. The researchers look on, finally grasping the true scale of the power clash between the two students. Chen Qingshan watches the arena intently, telling his colleague not to jump to conclusions just yet. The bearded observer agrees, noting that Fang Zhou remains eerily composed for someone cornered. Fang Zhou senses the pressure mounting and knows he can no longer hold anything back. Channeling his full mana reserves, he slams his staff down to trigger a massive summoning. 30 skeletons erupt from the ground, leaving the researchers in the booth completely speechless. Yifan finds himself surrounded by the undead legion, yet he does not break his combat stance. Watching from the sidelines, the observer wonders if Fang Zhou has a hidden ace tucked away. Yifan launches himself into the fray, cutting down the first wave with a relentless assault. Bone fragments scatter across the floor as the skeletal summons crumble under his blade. Distance is all the challenger needs to reset and prepare for his next high-speed maneuver. Energy crackles around him as he gathers momentum, preparing to dive back into the swarm. Fang Zhou shifts his stance and activates a displacement technique to reposition mid-fight. Chen Qingshan assumes the fight is decided, convinced a mage cannot withstand such an aggressive charge. The recruit lunges forward with a lethal strike, aiming to end the match in one blow. Fang Zhou reveals he lured his opponent in, instantly manifesting a solid barrier of bone. The sudden collision sends Yifan reeling backward, completely caught off guard by the defense. Realizing the summoner just debuted an entirely new skill, the observers are left reeling. Fang Zhou nonchalantly apologizes for the trick, keeping his cool as he resets the battlefield. The arena floor settles as he regroups his remaining units to maintain control over the space. Chen Qingshan can barely process the tactical shift, stunned by the complexity of the summoner's new arsenal. Chen Qingshan notes how Yifan considers the summoner's underhanded tricks to be beneath him, but the reality on the field is that Fang Zhou is masking his presence with optical camouflage. Yifan struggles to pinpoint the real body while navigating through a thicket of skeletal clones, calling out for a direct confrontation. The recruit finds himself surrounded by the unmoving undead, sensing his energy reserves draining away rapidly. Yifan decides he has no choice but to burn his trump card. A massive surge of power erupts from his body, tearing through the air. The observers watch in disbelief as he unleashes a high-level technique typically reserved for veterans, locking onto his target. Yifan channels every ounce of his remaining strength into the strike, screaming out his challenge. He executes the Skyfall strike directly at the hidden summoner. Raw power floods the arena as he commits fully to the devastating downward arc. The shockwave tears through the skeletal formation, incinerating everything in its path. A lone skeleton takes the full brunt of the impact, its armor shattering under the immense pressure. Blinding light consumes the center of the room as the technique makes contact. Smoke billows across the floor while Yifan gasps, exhausted from the massive output. His blade slices through the debris, confident that he finally secured the victory, shouting for the medical team to assist. He expresses his reluctance to claim another life. The researchers look on with complex expressions, their earlier confidence replaced by growing unease. Fang Zhou watches from the sidelines, his eyes narrowing as he notices their strange reactions. Yifan approaches the remains of his target, expecting to see the summoner's body. Realization hits him like a hammer when he sees only a pile of bones and an empty cloak. Yifan pieces together the trick, realizing the skeletal decoy was actually a double camouflage. Frustrated by the deception, he finds himself immediately surrounded by the real skeleton army. Fang Zhou appears right behind him, coolly thanking the recruit for a truly honorable duel. The realization of defeat sinks in as Yifan lowers his guard, his energy completely spent, echoing through the arena. The official announcement declares Fang Zhou the winner of the match, drained of all his strength. Yifan struggles to even stay upright after that massive exertion. A skeleton steps forward to assist the weary fighter, gently guiding him away from the field. Exhaustion is written all over Yifan's face as he quietly mutters a word of gratitude. Smirking, Fang Zhou dismisses the thanks, claiming it was just a little pity for the loser. Yifan swears he will come back stronger, though Fang Zhou brushes off the intensity. Chen Qingshan watches the pair, admitting that Fang Zhou has far exceeded his expectations. Lu Renjia chimes in with a jab at the underhanded tactics, calling the winner a future master. When Lu Renjia asks about the origin of the new shield spell, Fang Zhou confirms it is his own invention. He explains how a lucky discovery while practicing summon skills led to creating Bone Shield and Bone Javelin. The researchers exchange a knowing look, clearly impressed by such rapid innovation. Praising the display, Lu Renjia insists they need to see more of these new abilities. Chen Qingshan agrees to the request, confirming he will arrange for more combat testing immediately. Although Fang Zhou protests his lack of energy, the teachers dismiss his concerns with a wave. The group moves to a supply crate, where Lu Renjia offers him a crate of recovery potions. Fang Zhou starts chugging the liquid like it is nothing, leaving the onlookers stunned by his capacity. Fang Zhou declares he has fully recovered, and the teachers immediately initiate the next combat trial. A mechanical dummy with a menacing face activates, waiting for the test to begin. Drawing on his necromancy, Fang Zhou manifests a glowing bone javelin in his hand. He launches the projectile at the machine, registering an attack power of 85 on the monitor. Chen Qingshan marvels at the offensive capabilities, noting how impressive it is that a student created these techniques. Lu Renjia signals for the defensive phase, ordering Fang Zhou to test his protective skills against the dummy. The mechanical opponent charges forward, throwing a heavy strike directly at the target. Fang Zhou summons a bone shield just in time, blocking the impact with a power rating of 80. Watching the data, Chen Qingshan remarks that the attack power matches that of seasoned Earth Knights. Lu Renjia laughs, praising Fang Zhou's potential as a necromancer while clapping him on the shoulder. Suggestively, the teacher advises Fang Zhou to register these unique skills into the official Federation database. Explaining the system, Lu Renjia reveals it is a massive collection center where mages trade contribution points for new techniques. Chen Qingshan confirms a branch exists within their research division, allowing Fang Zhou to access it whenever needed, thanking them for the guidance. Fang Zhou accepts the offer to visit the facility. The teachers direct him to the library's restricted wing, where the repository is located. Stepping through the entrance, Fang Zhou pushes open the heavy doors to the archives. Wandering inside, he finds the room shrouded in complete darkness. Questioning why the library is so dim, a soft glow emanates from deep within the rows of shelves as he continues forward. Suddenly, the entire room illuminates with floating golden symbols and magical texts covering every surface. Realizing the scale of the repository, Fang Zhou finds every skill he could possibly want waiting for him. Fang Zhou reaches out to the central pedestal, channeling his energy into the archive's interface. The system confirms his custom skills are registered, granting him 200 contribution points and passive income. Knowing he can't waste this opportunity, he turns his attention toward the massive rows of shelves. Grabbing a heavy tome from the rack, he begins to scan the ancient text for hidden potential. A green interface appears as he decides to use his existing knowledge as a foundation for further deductions. The system detects his meditation technique is eligible for an upgrade, prompting him to confirm the soul power consumption without a second of hesitation. Fang Zhou taps the screen to initiate the process. A chilling, overwhelming aura of death floods the room, radiating directly from the skill text. Glowing red eyes pierce through the darkness as a skeletal monarch emerges within his mental space. The entity sits upon a throne of shadows, and with this manifestation, the upgrade for his meditation completes. A spectral book drifts from the skeleton's bony fingers, hovering directly toward him. Catching the grimoire, he realizes this forbidden knowledge was meant specifically for his path. Swirling emerald magic envelops him as the pages flip open, absorbing the essence of the master. The skeletal sovereign looms behind him, bestowing the ultimate form of necromantic focus. Shards of residual energy shatter around him, signaling the successful integration of the technique. The new skill doubles his meditation speed while significantly boosting the potency of all his undead units. Reflecting on his recent battle, Fang Zhou realizes he nearly ran out of mental mana. Determining that he needs to shore up his endurance, he starts searching the archives for a solution. He selects a mental recovery technique called Tranquil Mind, paying 20 points to master it immediately. This new ability will passively restore his mental reserves, ensuring he can keep his summons active much longer. Selecting the option to dump 10 soul power points, he initiates the learning process for Tranquil Mind. Swirling blue energy coalesces around the pages in his hand, marking the skill as successfully acquired. Checking his internal status, Fang Zhou confirms a noticeable uptick in his mental recovery rate. Confident in his current trajectory, he muses that a rematch against Yifan would end in a total stomp, spending 60 contribution points. He secures several auxiliary skills to serve as fodder for future research. Shifting his focus toward gear, he realizes that his current strength far outpaces his basic equipment. Investing another 40 points, he authorizes the exchange for an apprentice-tier gear set. Equipping the hat, necklace, and rings, he feels his efficiency stats begin to climb. Completing the 4-piece collection triggers a set bonus that buffs his training speed by 10%. Feeling his potential expand, Fang Zhou decides that his leveling speed is about to hit a new gear. Scanning his updated stat block, he notes the overall improvements from this library visit. Summoning his spectral attendant, he begins to weigh how to further empower his strongest unit. Realizing the skeleton needs its own arsenal, he decides to invest in specialized combat techniques. Purchasing the weapon mastery block and war cry scrolls, he drains 30 more points from his reserves. Tucking the grimoires away, he wonders if he can find similar efficiency gains in future sessions. Exiting the archives, he encounters the researchers who are eager to hear about his progress. Confirming his success, Fang Zhou admits that the loot from this trip was absolutely worth it. Running into Yifan, he accepts a challenge to a rematch while being offered a recovery potion. Yifan declares his intent to go all out this time, refusing to accept another defeat. Watching the scene unfold, a bystander notes that their sparring match will serve as excellent extra training for both. Fang Zhou accepts the recovery potion, and the sparring match begins with zero hesitation. Yifan lunges forward immediately, shouting his rival's name as he charges into the fray, unleashing his fallen sky strike. He bets everything on a swift and decisive opening blow. Onlookers note his battle instincts are razor-sharp. Recognizing that speed is his only path to victory, calmly observing the incoming assault, Fang Zhou prepares to test his newly acquired combat techniques. A massive magic circle flares to life under his feet, signaling the start of his counter. Spectators question why he's still relying on basic summons. Despite the intensity of the fight, confusion hits the crowd when the energy levels begin to fluctuate and shift unpredictably. Staring at the surging mana, they realize the numbers are completely off the charts. An endless wave of skeletons erupts from the ground, overwhelming the entire training arena. The collision between the rivals' strike and the undead legion creates a massive shockwave. Observers realize the kid has leveled up his necromancy significantly since their last encounter. Fang Zhou grins while commenting that the move is definitely stronger than before. Teasing his rival, he notes that his own skills have also evolved just a little bit. Yifan finds himself cornered by a spectral soldier and panics as the pressure mounts, begging the summon to spare his face. He gets sent flying by the overwhelming force. The match ends abruptly, leaving the challenger completely incapacitated and needing a week of recovery. The researcher asks if Fang Zhou intends to start a Necromancer association, but he quickly refuses. He knows that drawing too much attention to his system would be far more trouble than it is worth. Returning to the library, he heads back into the archives to hunt for more hidden power. A mysterious woman notices a Necromancer has registered a new skill in the system. She immediately spends 20 contribution points to unlock the power for herself, scrolling through the manual. She finds techniques for bone javelins and shields and cannot help but admire the genius behind them. Excited by the discovery, she rushes off to share the news with her father. Upon entering the office, she finds the principal and Teacher Lu in the middle of a heated debate. Teacher Lu is desperately petitioning the principal to add Fang Zhou to the elite seed list for future training. The principal dismisses the request, arguing that a necromancer's potential is inherently capped regardless of current performance. But he spits out his tea when Teacher Lu reveals the kid has already mastered 2 distinct skills on his own. The intensity of these new necromancy abilities is clearly bothering the old man as he tries to process the implications. Su Xinyan bursts into the office to tell her father about the new necromancer skills she just found. The principal looks up. Clearly skeptical about the sudden emergence of such powerful dark magic techniques, she demonstrates the raw power of the bone-based spells to prove that these are not just ordinary parlor tricks. Su Xinyan asks her father if he knows who developed these incredible skills. Before he can answer, she boldly declares that she wants to find the creator and become his apprentice. Her father shuts that down immediately, telling her it is absolutely impossible for her to take him on as a master. When she asks why, he points to Fang Zhou, who is just sitting quietly in the back of the room. Suddenly, the class is interrupted by the rival who bursts in and challenges Fang Zhou to another fight. Fang Zhou just sighs, wondering how many times he has to beat this guy before he finally learns his lesson. The rival is feeling confident, claiming that this time he has finally surpassed his limits. He boasts about his progress while the girl next to him looks on, oblivious to the fact that he is still just chasing a lost cause. The woman explains how she recently mastered a specialized support skill called Lullaby, which drastically boosts spirit power recovery and enhances the efficiency of any training session. But the catch is that it only works 3 times a day, and she had to spend a fortune in contribution points to acquire it. The rival ignores this and keeps badgering Fang Zhou, convinced that this time he finally has the edge to win. Fang Zhou is deep in thought, wondering if this lullaby skill could actually amplify his own skeletal bone training. He suddenly reaches out to the woman, offering to buy her remaining daily uses of the skill, completely blowing off the rival. Fang Zhou summons his undead army into the middle of the room. He tells the rival to warm up by fighting the skeletons, provided he pays the necessary contribution points afterward. The woman nods and agrees to activate Lullaby for him right then and there. Glowing green energy washes over Fang Zhou as the skill takes effect. His inner mental state shifts instantly into the dark, red-hued realm of the undead. The skeleton sovereign appears to inspect the new status boost, noting the unexpected synergy with the clone's own stats. Fang Zhou decides this is the perfect opportunity to field test the clone's combat potential. A massive mace manifests in the skeleton's grip as it prepares for a heavy strike. The bone spear technique ignites with a chilling blue aura. The clone executes a perfect parry, absorbing the incoming impact and demonstrating its defensive mastery. Weapon mastery levels skyrocket as the clone keeps up the relentless pressure. It shifts into a new combat stance, tearing through the air with raw, spectral power. Cold blue flames flicker in the skeleton's eye sockets, signaling a massive surge in output, and the clone releases a final devastating strike that showcases the true potential of their combined training. The skeleton sovereign clone lands a clean hit, shattering the opposition's guard with a calculated reverse thrust. Green system notifications flood the view as his strength and soul power stats climb, proving the lullaby skill's worth. More enemies charge in from the distance, but the clone holds its ground against the incoming wave. A heavy blow connects with the ground, sending shockwaves through the ranks of the charging undead. Quick stat adjustments continue to pulse as the clone keeps dismantling his foes one by one. Seeing a massive legion still standing, the clone laughs maniacally and taunts them to attack together. A new system notification confirms he has mastered the battle cry skill, boosting his attributes even further. The ground erupts as the clone unleashes a shockwave that knocks back the entire front line. Stat gains keep stacking up, and the clone vows to push his power to even greater heights. Sudden movement in the sky draws his attention away from the battlefield. A massive, glowing presence descends toward the village, catching the clone completely by surprise. A radiant, angelic figure manifests in the air, wielding a blade that hums with divine energy. The Bone Angel emerges as a high-level boss, turning the beginner village into a war zone. It looms over the area, massive wings spread wide as it prepares to descend on its target. The angel slams its blade down with terrifying force, cratering the earth upon impact. Realization hits the clone that he is severely outmatched, yet he refuses to back down. Defense is clearly not an option against such power. So he pivots to an all-out offensive strategy, activating the battle cry skill again. The clone screams, pushing his aura to the breaking point. He lunges forward with a bone spear, aiming to pierce through the boss's divine guard. The clash erupts into a violent exchange as the clone forces the boss into a defensive stance. The clone triggers a brutal strike, channeling raw kinetic energy into his assault, unleashing a flurry of rapid-fire strikes that hammer against the boss. The boss watches closely, Wondering what kind of gambit he is pulling now, suddenly the clone commits to a decisive, high-stakes maneuver. He charges headlong into the boss's guard to force an opening. A brutal parry rings out as steel meets bone. The force of the impact sends the clone spiraling through the air before he crashes into the bedrock with enough force to shatter the ground, coughing up essence. The clone realizes he barely survived the recoil, that gamble saved his frame from total disintegration, though it was a close call. Yet his blue eye flares with focus as he spots a critical opening. The boss's center is exposed, showing a clear vulnerability in that divine form. The clone observes the boss's posture, questioning his next tactical move. Massive winds begin to whip around the boss as he starts a violent spin. Panic sets in for the clone as he realizes the sheer scale of the incoming attack. The boss tears through the landscape with his spinning blade like a living cyclone. That spin is a calculated move to compensate for the lost arm. The boss locks onto him with a precision target, leaving no room for error. Backing away, the clone finds himself cornered against a dead end. There is no escape now, so he prepares for the final, devastating collision. The skeleton sovereign clone decides to bet everything on one final, desperate gamble. Observing the Bone Angel's lethal whirlwind, he forces himself to stay calm, spotting a momentary gap in that spinning defense. He prepares to strike, surging forward with everything he has. The clone launches a direct frontal charge, roaring as he closes the distance. He readies his weapon for the impact. Noticing the boss's brittle frame, he realizes the opponent's defenses are failing. Seeing the exposed soul fire core, he knows exactly where to aim. Unleashing a bone javelin, the clone fires a projectile straight at the mark. The Bone Angel realizes too late that his core is under direct assault. Watching the javelin tear through the air, the boss attempts to block with his wings. Realizing those wings were meant to hide his vulnerability, the clone presses the attack. Meanwhile, his system triggers a fusion deduction for a new skill. A successful system ping confirms the acquisition of bone shackles. Grinning at the new capability, the clone realizes he can now fuse his own undead skills. Pointing his hand toward the hovering boss, he prepares to ground the aerial threat. Chains of spectral energy manifest out of thin air, binding the Bone Angel instantly, yanking the chains downward with all his might. The clone forces the boss to the earth, dragging the Bone Angel into the dirt. He warns the boss to stop resisting. Raising his blade for the finishing blow, the clone locks onto the exposed target. Feeling the thrill of victory surge through his frame, he readies the final strike. The blade bites deep, finishing off the downed enemy in one clean strike. As the Bone Angel's remaining soul fire drifts upward, ripe for the taking, the skeleton sovereign clone reaches out to absorb the energy. Claiming the spoils, system alerts confirm a massive influx of soul power, pushing his attributes past the threshold. Realizing his stats have hit the race limit, he wonders why his physical form has not changed, looking toward the horizon. He finds himself hungry for more power than this lowly rank provides. A prompt appears asking if he wants to initiate evolution, so he taps yes without hesitation. Dark energy swirls around him as the transition begins to reshape his very essence. Declaring that his path of evolution starts now, he surrenders to the surging flames. Feeling the intensity of the transformation, he embraces the crushing weight of his new power. The process concludes with a notification confirming his successful evolution into a bone warrior. Raw strength floods his system as all core attributes receive a massive 30-point boost. Discovering an unexpected bonus, he unlocks the unique talent of a bone monarch. Reading the system notes, he learns that his skeletal minions will now grow stronger much faster. Testing his new command, he senses the potential to lead his own growing army, catching movement in the distance. He turns to find a lowly skeleton wandering nearby. Testing his new strength, he delivers a casual blow that shatters the weakling's armor instantly. Observing the damage, he realizes his combat power has scaled far beyond basic defenses. Noticing another system prompt, he sees he can now upgrade his own skeletal gear. Satisfied with these gains, he prepares to march forward with his newfound status and strength. The system confirms the bone armor upgrade is finished, granting a massive defensive boost. Feeling the armor fuse perfectly to his frame, the skeleton sovereign clone notes a significant jump in overall power. Locking his gaze onto a nearby skeleton, he decides to put his new equipment to the ultimate test. Apologizing to the target for the impending violence, he initiates a combat practice session. Launching a swift, crushing strike, he lets the force of the blow rip through the air. The lowly skeleton barely registers the attack before being caught in the lethal path. Watching the target crumble into dust, he barely pauses to acknowledge the destruction. Impact craters spiderweb across the ground as the skeletal remains are pulverized into nothingness. Shrugging off the overkill, he admits he was just testing the reach of his fist, noticing the marginal stat gains. He realizes these small mobs offer zero progression for his current level. Looking toward the horizon, he determines that venturing into the deeper regions is now mandatory. Shifting his focus back to the immediate task, he begins to channel his inner energy. Sitting down in the void, he starts a focused meditation to recover his depleted reserves. Suddenly gasps for breath, his body struggling to maintain control over the summoned bone structures stumbling toward him. Xiaochen rushes in to steady the gasping summoner before he collapses. Reflecting on his recent battle, Yifan notes the lingering injury sustained from the previous boss fight. Waving off her visible concern, he insists that a brief meditation session will set everything right. Catching a sudden sound, Feng Zhou stops to investigate the source of the disturbance. Rounding the corner, he finds Yifan fighting to suppress the erratic bones he summoned earlier. Watching the situation spiral, Yifan realizes his control is finally breaking down completely. The challenger leaps in for a direct confrontation, but Fang Zhou is not interested in a fair fight, so he instantly casts bone shackles to bind the guy midair and drop him to the floor, calling out the move as a cheap shot. The challenger demands a rematch once he earns enough points. Onlookers whisper about this new ability while Fang Zhou walks away, completely unfazed by the loser's complaints. Watching from the sidelines, Xiaochen wonders just how deep his actual power level really goes. Walking down the long stone steps, Fang Zhou leaves the training grounds behind for the day. Checking his phone, he realizes it is already Friday and time to head back home. Reflecting on how busy his life has been since awakening, he decides a visit is long overdue. Arriving at the resource department building, he prepares to finalize his financial business. Requesting a conversion of contribution points into liquid currency, he watches the clerk process the transaction. Seeing the massive point deduction on the monitor, he confirms the exchange is exactly what he wanted. Grabbing the heavy leather briefcase filled with cash, he thanks the staff member for the quick service. Walking out with the funds, he knows this money will make a huge difference for those waiting. Arriving at the orphanage, he sees the kids running around the yard without a care in the world. Sister Ruru greets him with a smile, clearly happy to see him back at the facility, setting down his bags. Fang Zhou confirms he is officially back from his latest expedition. The kids rush over immediately, excited to see if he brought them any special treats. Ruru asks about his recent school assessment, curious to know how he performed. Confirming his awakening as a necromancer, he explains that he managed to pass the test. The kids gather around him in awe, totally fascinated by the idea of someone who can summon skeletons. Demonstrating his newfound necromancy, Fang Zhou conjures a pair of pint-sized skeletons for the kids. The children swarm the tiny summons in delight, finding the undead duo endlessly entertaining, shifting his focus. Fang Zhou hands Ruru a bag containing the funds for the orphanage's operations. Just as a mysterious observer watches the heartwarming scene from the shadows, a hulking stranger in a gold chain strides into the yard, asking if he's interrupting anything important. Several thugs follow him onto the orphanage grounds, instantly killing the peaceful mood. Ruru recognizes these intruders as debt collectors from a local gang demanding payment for an overdue loan. The lead thug shoves Ruru to the ground. Showing zero restraint despite the children nearby, declaring today the final deadline, the gangster threatens to seize the land if they fail to cough up the cash. The gang leader looms over the yard, making it clear their property is now forfeit. One of the little girls calls out to Ruru, terrified by the aggressive display. The thug lunges at the child, only for her to be swatted away by the man's massive hand. She cries out in pain from the impact, drawing Fang Zhou's immediate, lethal attention. A skeletal warrior manifests instantly to intercept the thug, blocking the path to the child. The gangster recoils at the sight of the summoned bone construct. While Fang Zhou coldly demands an apology for the assault, the lead thug realizes his target is a necromancer and whispers the reveal to his associate. The associate steps forward, manifesting a flaming demon mask to challenge Fang Zhou. Fang Zhou notes the guy is a class holder, showing no fear as the combat intensifies. Ruru quickly explains that these men are predatory lenders who trap the dean in a debt scheme for training gear. The true nature of their business is revealed as a front for exploitation, and the gang leader prepares to unleash his full power. Ruru confirms that the predatory lending scheme is designed specifically to drain the orphanage dry. Fang Zhou snaps at her for keeping the massive debt a secret while the interest continues to skyrocket. The lead gangster sneers at Fang Zhou, warning the student to back off before he gets in over his head, tossing a briefcase onto the ground. He challenges the necromancer to pay up if he wants to play hero. Ruru gasps as Fang Zhou produces the full 100,000 coins. Wondering where he even got that kind of capital, the gang leader inspects the contents of the case. Clearly unimpressed by the sum he just demanded, throwing the case aside in a fit of rage, he declares the payment completely insufficient to cover his demands. The villain reveals his true goal is the orphanage land itself. Dismissing the cash as a mere drop in the bucket, changing the terms on the spot, he demands 500,000 coins for the supposed overdue fees. Fang Zhou realizes these thugs have no intention of negotiating and came here solely to stir up conflict. The gangster mocks their resistance, openly admitting he wants to seize the prime property for his own gain. Signaling his subordinates to attack, the leader orders them to crush the opposition and take the land by force. Facing a swarm of thugs, Fang Zhou remains unfazed and begins casting his signature necromancy spell. One of the gang members starts to sweat as the air pressure drops. Sensing the sudden shift in power, spectral skeletal warriors erupt from the ground to surround the attackers, forcing them to halt in their tracks. Fang Zhou issues a final, chilling ultimatum, ordering the gang to kneel and apologize or face the consequences. A skeleton looms inches from a thug's face, its hollow eyes staring down the terrified gangster. The subordinate tries to keep his cool. Frantically shouting to his boss that they can just smash the weak summons to pieces, chaos erupts as the gang realizes they are actually fighting class holders, and they scramble to regain their composure. Meanwhile, the terrified child continues to weep in the background, unaware that the tide of the battle has already turned. Fang Zhou commands his skeletal army to scatter, diving straight into the heart of the gang. The thugs mock the summons as mere piles of bones, foolishly rushing in to teach the necromancer a lesson. One gangster charges in with a heavy spiked club, swinging wildly at a skeleton's skull. Blue flames flare within the soldier's eye sockets. Signaling a lethal counterattack is coming before the thug can land his blow, the skeleton effortlessly sidesteps the strike and retaliates with a clean slash. Another gang member screams as his hand is severed, terrified by the sheer strength and speed of these unnatural warriors. Watching from the sidelines, the gang leader struggles to process how a student-age summoner could be this dangerous. Convinced his own power is superior, the leader lunges at Fang Zhou with a heavy-hitting bone-shattering strike. Noticing the incoming threat, Fang Zhou calls out for Xiaozhu to move out of the line of fire. A solid wall of spectral bone shields materializes, absorbing the full force of the leader's massive club. The gang leader reels back in disbelief, unable to grasp why his strongest attack was so easily negated. Fang Zhou immediately retaliates by manifesting glowing bone shackles that wrap tightly around the gangster's limbs. The magical chains slam the thug into the pavement with crushing force, leaving him coughing up blood, pinned and humiliated. The leader continues to spew curses, refusing to accept that he has already lost this fight. The skeleton sovereign clone looms over the restrained gangster. Silencing his tantrum with an imposing presence, Fang Zhou stands over the defeated thug, demanding that he get on his knees and apologize right now.